Hello and welcome to Counterpoint. I am your guest host, Michelle Simard, and this show is about the recent current events. I think it's always good to provide counterpoint viewpoints on the topics that may affect us of the day. And today we have Elliot Hughes, Brock Stephenson, and Hannah Salamon-Vegh. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. There's so many things to unpack, but today I wanted to discuss the recent attack on Salman Rushdie and what it says about our culture and society right now. And Brock, what are your thoughts about that?
Thankfully, Salman Rushdie looks like he's going to survive the 10 stabbings he received earlier in August. I think the real challenge here is in a world where woke society and cancel culture are discouraging diversity of opinion. People think words are violence, but in fact, violence is violence. Salman Rushdie's words never killed anyone, but he almost got killed for his words and a fatwa issued against him 3.5 decades ago, before his attacker was even born. I think this is the real challenge. People need to understand there can be a diversity of opinion. Religion can be criticized, not just Christianity. And sticks and stones may break your bones, but words should never kill you. And in Salman Rushdie's case, he was a victim of this. Thankfully, writers around the world are coming to his defense.
Thank you. And Hannah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And not only has he been attacked like this, but a bunch of his translators have either been attacked or killed because the fatwa was not only on him, but the publishers, the translators, everybody associated with him basically. And he has been in hiding for 10 years and only more recently has been out in the public and moving around and being able to participate in society more. But yes, like you said, it's not only Christianity that can be criticized. Islam and Hinduism and any religion, any belief system should be able to be, criticized or written about without fear of repercussions like this. And it's interesting to see not only woke culture working hand in hand with many ideologies nowadays, but especially working hand in hand with Islam. And Islam, radical Islam, if you criticize, the Quran or anything like that, you have death threats, you have people kill you, that type of thing. And we saw that with the Charlie Hebdo case in 2015. And with woke culture, you say anything wrong, then you're canceled, your career is ruined. So in both cases, obviously one, is more serious than the other. You will be killed often with radical Islam if you say anything that they don't like, but with woke culture, your career will be ruined if you say anything that they don't like as well. And at the end of the day, the most important thing coming out of here is that we have to protect freedom of speech. And this, puts a chilling effect on writers and authors, and even people commentating on it. Like J.K. Rowling tweeted support for him and hoped that he'd get better, and then someone tweeted out, "You're next. Don't worry, you're next." And so now the British government is looking into that threat.
Yeah, I think that's a little like the way I see it is this. For many people, and I understand, people from different cultures in different countries, they may have a different view about things. And like you said, a different religion. And this fatwa, as Brock mentioned, was done before this attacker was even born. I mean, the question to me is this, is that we have people, we have immigration, we have people come into different types of societies with different beliefs. And we hope that while they may not always share our beliefs, that they respect our beliefs and live the certain way of life that is what we had intended, which, no harm done to others. You don't attack people for no reason. And yet somehow this still happened with a person who was living in the United States. He felt so compelled to do this and cause this kind of damage. And the consequences for him are irrelevant. So I don't know, Elliot, what do you think about that? Do you think it's a threat on our democratic values?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I would just start with saying that, it's great to hear that it sounds like Salman Rushdie is going to recover. Although, he might lose an eye, he's sustained serious injuries. So, thank goodness for that he's making it through. But it does definitely raise the point and raise the question that, we always need to sort of, be watching and fighting for the freedom of speech and the ability to criticize and the ability to say what we feel and think. I think we also, however, do need to just be a little careful. This gentleman who did the attack, I haven't seen necessarily any specific sort of, things that he has said, or if he has in fact sort of said the reason why he did this was because of, the fatwa that was issued a number of decades ago. For all we know, he could be sort of, a deranged individual. I don't know yet. We don't know the facts yet. That said, I go to back my earlier point and something that both Brock and Hannah raised and you raised, Michelle, which is, we need to be able to stand up for what we believe in, to be able to say what we want to say and say what we think, and everybody should be able to be criticized, because that's what makes that open society. So thank goodness he's feeling better and on the mend.
Welcome back. And today we're here with Elliot Hughes, Stephenson, and Hannah Salamon-Vegh to discuss current events. And on this next portion, I want to talk about your guys' thoughts on China encroaching on Canada's mineral industry and how the Liberal government is handling it. Because it's more than just minerals. The encroachment is coming from all angles. And I just wanted to hear what your thoughts about that, because as you know, there's a societal divide that's happening in the world. And I think the more rights that we give to other countries, especially on industries that are very prominent within Canada, the more it encroaches upon us and our sovereignty and how we fare in the world. Elliot, given your background, I thought you'd be a great person to discuss this with.
Yeah, a very interesting article this weekend in the Globe and Mail talking about a Canadian company that makes an important piece or has a mine in Canada that has an important piece that makes cell phones and other important, for EVs and so on. And this is unfortunately something that we've been seeing and hearing a lot more about recently. Over the last number of years, China has aggressively been trying to buy up companies, not only in Canada, but throughout the world, to secure the minerals that they need, in some cases other things as well, that they need in order to succeed, economically in the future. Canada is getting better at this. Having served for the Minister of National Defense, I was involved in reviewing deals and understanding what was happening and going through that process. However, you get these ones that slip through the cracks. We need a much tighter strategy as a country. We need to be able to say no when it's of national interest, as in this case it was, and we should have said no. And it's hard to understand how this slipped through the cracks. China is poking and prodding a lot of different areas, but we need to get a lot tougher and a lot better. We're getting better, but we got a lot more work to do in order to stop selling off some of these key companies to what is an emerging and very difficult challenger and foe on the world stage.
Yeah, because really, at the end of the day, why was it so important for China to have it? Because, a Chinese company, or usually these are state-owned companies. And why was it so important? Because this particular piece, this mining piece, is so pivotal, like we discussed, for cell phones. And so at the end of the day, not many other countries or other places have this. So that's what makes this so key and so pivotal. And we've lost it, but yet I'm not seeing anything else coming from the Liberal government to try to amend and fix it. What are your thoughts, Brock?
Canada has a long history of being concerned about foreign ownership of our resources. It used to be mostly about the United States. Now that we see the emergence of China, I think this is a similar concern, but I think that Canada's lost its focus on these issues. There have been Chinese investments that have been rejected, such as a gold mine in Nunavut a few years ago. But with the dependent on the global electronics industry focusing on manufacturing in China, the resources are required in China. And that's part of our challenge as China's investing in Canada or Africa or Latin America to have these resources extracted and exported to China. Already half of our exports to China are resource-based. I think this is a challenge for us, and the government doesn't seem to have a consistent focus on how it reviews these investments.
Or a policy, or even a consistent policy on it, because, the argument could be made is given, the state of the world and where we're at, I mean, there should be some national type of policies that protect certain industries and businesses for the betterment of Canada. And to me, I think that, like you said, there's no consistency in any part of it, and we don't even understand, nor do I see anything to try to fix it. Hannah, what do you think about that?
Yes, the Trudeau government has been giving China a pass the entire time he's been in office. And in the last 5 years, less than 1% of the buying out of Canadian companies by Chinese ones have been subject to in-depth security reviews under Section 25.3 of the National Security Act, and almost none were blocked. And including in the last year, out of the 826 foreign investment filings, Canada conducted only 11 Section 25.3 reviews. And especially during COVID, we saw, even like producing masks and PPE and all these different types of things like that. We don't have the industry to produce that because either we're making them in China or China is buying out our factories here. And Canada is helping China become the superpower that it's on its way to be. And we're giving our resources away to an enemy, which is an incredibly dangerous thing to do.
I'm not quite sure if I agree with China becoming a superpower. I would argue China is a superpower. The question is how strong are we going to make them? Because
and it's hard if Canada, it's just say we have a conservative government come in next. It's very hard for Canada to start to do protectionist policies after a country like China has bought up so many of our resources, because literally the enemy is within. It's not without anymore. It's within.
Exactly. So to that point, we're going to come back with our next subject. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Hello and welcome back. We are here with our political commentators, Elliot Hughes, Brock Stephenson, and Hannah Salamon-Vegh. So in recent news, we heard about a celebrity pastor in Ontario, Bruxy Cavey, and he's been accused of sexual assault on one of his parishioners. The Canadian Criminal Code is clear that there's no consent if sexual interactions were induced by someone abusing a position of trust and authority, which in this case it seemed like it was because he was her pastor for many years and the parishioner looked up to them. The allegations have not been proven, but according to the accuser, she consented to many of the things her and the pastor did. But at the same token, after many years, she figured, wait a second, I'm only doing these things because he's telling me to do it. He's in a position of power, and that's when she went to the authorities. So what are your thoughts about this? Because I think sometimes it's quite difficult to differentiate because it's clear that she did consent to something. So Hannah, what do you think about this scandal and what do you think about the accuser?
Well, this is very disappointing to see because, Christians and people in the church are supposed to be the ones who have the highest standards of morality. And especially when someone is in a position of leadership like this, like a pastor, people usually consider that person to be more morally upstanding and someone who's an example leading their congregation. We've seen this recently with Carl Lenz in the States and Rabbi Zacharias as well, people that, led, incredible ministries for many years. And then all of a sudden stuff comes out that's very concerning to say the least. But the important thing is that regardless of all the details that are coming out, we need to just keep, objectivity and wait for investigations to go through. Yes, he's been charged, but he is innocent until proven guilty. It definitely looks like he's been abusing his power for a long period of time. So there has to be a proper process to go through to make sure all the facts and details come out. And if you actually did these things, to be prosecuted and be, dealt with, because we can't have these types of things going on, especially in the church.
Yeah, no, I agree. And of course, that's why we have our system. You're innocent until proven guilty. And we'll see what happens. I think the consent issue is a big one because consent is so difficult nowadays. There's a recent Supreme Court case that came out about consent and consent with or without a condom. So at the end of the day, consent is very tricky. But the other issue I also had is after we go through the whole process in the trial, and let's just say this, pastor is found that he's not guilty without a reasonable doubt, because that's what the standard is, unlike civil law where it's a balance of probabilities, which is why, at one point, O.J. Simpson was not found criminally guilty, but yet on the civil court he was, because it's a different standard of proof. In this case, even if he's found not guilty, the question is, what does that do to him? Because now he's had shame put on him in the church and a spotlight, and he might have had to remove himself. Brock, what are your thoughts about that?
It looks like his leadership role is done, whether he's guilty or innocent of the allegations. Since he resigned in March, there's been more allegations that have come forward. There's been 4 individuals in positions of authority at the meeting place who have had allegations against them over the recent years and past decades. And I think it's a challenge for this evangelical Anabaptist congregation. I think their overseers are doing the right thing, putting the victims first, but it's going to be a court case for at least this first incident, and we'll see how it unfolds. But whether he's innocent or guilty, I think his career as a leader in their community is over.
I know, and if he's found not guilty, was there some veracity to what you said? I'm sure, like everything, there's always some portion of truth. The question, of course, comes down to consent. And Elliot, what are your thoughts about this issue of consent? Because, usually with most stories, there is some veracity of truth in it. It's just an interpretation. Some people see it differently than others.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps there was consent, but I think, as was mentioned by the others, I mean, a leader in the church needs to have a higher standard applied to them, frankly.
Yes.
They were in a position of power, whether there was consent or not, that would seem inappropriate. And I think on that basis alone, we'll find out whether or not there are criminal charges and he goes to jail. But on that basis alone, he should be removed from that position, because whether or not it was consensual or not, it was inappropriate. And that's not the type of leadership we need, whether it's in the church, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics or in society. And people need to be aware of those rules and make sure we stick to them. And we need to, hold people to account in those situations.
I agree. And you made up a very valid point. And the point is this is why I brought this topic up, is because as we move more and more forward with technology and everything that's happening in this world, consent becomes extremely tricky. And like we just mentioned, this pastor has resigned. He's not a leader of the community anymore. But what's going to happen? And the standard of proof is different in the criminal proceeding as opposed to civil, because it has to be without a reasonable doubt. So it may not be without a reasonable doubt, and this man may be found not guilty. But doesn't mean that what he did may have not been wrong, and there might have been some overreaching. But the question is, his career is going to be ruined, and should he ever be in that power again? I don't know. I mean, this is why we want to have this conversation today, because I think these are issues that are really important to society, and consent is something that we need to discuss. Counterpoint, and today's show is about current events. And as we previously discussed, we have a lot of topics we want to unpack, and we have Elliot Hughes, Brock Stephenson, and Hannah Salamon-Vegh as our political commentators to talk about this new topic on the emergency act that happened. So as we know, the trucker convoy happened in February, and the Prime Minister felt inclined that he should invoke the Emergency Act in order to control what he felt was a national threat. But recently we have just found out that there's new evidence that the Prime Minister invoked this act when he and the cabinet were told by national and security intelligence staff that there could be a breakthrough with the trucker convoy, meaning that you might not necessarily have to invoke the Emergency Act because there may not be a national threat. The Prime Minister still invoked the Emergency Act that allows sweeping powers to a government in power. It should only be used if it's absolutely necessary and there's clear evidence that national security truly is at jeopardy. So all of you guys, what do you think about this new evidence, and do you think it means anything? I'll start with you, Brock.
It's a continuation of our problem throughout the coronavirus era, government communication underperforming. The Liberal government under Justin Trudeau brought in the Emergencies Act, withdrew it before they had to have real comment on it. Now we're seeing the after effects as parliamentary committees and federal courts investigate it. The parliamentary committee NDP members are finally stepping up and asking for the same documents the federal court got. We're seeing that the Liberals could have communicated that the barricades at the 3 border crossings were affecting the economy up to $33 billion a day in trade. Instead, they don't say things like that. And as a result, Canadians don't trust what's happening in this case. And with the Emergencies Act, I think that's been the whole problem, is terrible communications by the Trudeau Liberals.
Do you mean terrible communications between the government and the people, or between the national security and intelligence advisors?
I meant the people, but across the board.
Okay. And Hannah, what are your thoughts?
Yes, it's incredible to see how Justin Trudeau, after the Emergency Measures Act was repealed and he went to Ukraine and went to the UN and all that, was lecturing world leaders about how they should respect freedom of speech and democracy and support peaceful protests and stuff like that. It was such a slap in the face to the truckers who were fighting to have our rights back, to have the country reopened. And, people are upset about the fact that the truckers were the ones, keeping Ottawa shut down for a month or whatever. But our government kept our country shut down for 2 years. And it's interesting that Justin Trudeau doesn't consider the Chinese government to be a national threat, but he considers, law-abiding, peaceful people. He considers, Canadian citizens to be a national threat. But I'm very glad this inquiry is going on right now. And just one last thing I'll say is that Pierre Trudeau was the only other prime minister that invoked the Federal Emergencies Act during a time of peace. That was in 1970 during the October crisis, and now Justin Trudeau, his son, doing it in 2022. Previous to that, with the previous Emergencies Act, which was called the War Measures Act, it was only brought in during the 2 world wars. So it kind of shows the priorities of the 2 Trudeaus.
Yes, but I would advocate that with the kidnapping that occurred and the FLQ, that the first Trudeau had a much more means to do it. And Elliot, you get the last word on this. What are your thoughts?
Look, I was living in Ottawa when this was going on. It was a lot more serious than it's being portrayed today. Look, if a burglar or a trespasser is coming to your house and says, sure, like I give up, do you let them sort of say you take their word for it? No, you finish the job. This was gone on for way too long, and it got to the point where it was sort of way too much. The Emergencies Act was the right call. It allowed the government to do things like, make tow trucks work and pull the tow trucks out. It allowed the police to use certain powers to be able to clear the crowds and use the military in some cases if need, or the RCMP to get the folks out of there. This was absolutely the right thing to do. You can't take the word of someone saying, well, we might be coming to the table and we may not.
Well, Trudeau refused to meet with the
It's got to go down.
It
had to come down. That was it. And it was a clear decision. No questions asked. And it's good it's good that we're having this debate. We're through Parliament. It's good to find out this information.
Yeah.
But there was no question that it was the right time to do.
Well, that's obviously the counterpoint, and that's what this show is about, giving different counterpoints. So thank you, all of you, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think it was fun and hope to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Counterpoint in the news forum is about allowing others to have a voice. I hope today's show from our political commentators gave you some food for thought and highlighted some of the important points about what's happening in the world today. I trust you enjoy the show, and we will see you again. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.